Chapter 12. Xavier's jaw hung open. He closed his mouth with an audible snap of his teeth, as he stared at the statue that had once been the living, breathing body of Sophia. It was true. She was a gargoyle. He darted his gaze from her immobile form to Sterling's dark and brooding presence as he arrived. A deep sense of anger filled him, snaked up his throat, and tried to choke him. Because of this man, Sophia feared everything in her life, hated herself, refused to acknowledge her attraction for him. No one, no matter how powerful they were, threatened his mate. Emitting a low growl of warning, Xavier managed to rein in the rampant fury. If Sterling was as dangerous as Sophia said, he'd need to control the shift. Good afternoon, sir. Are you our ferry captain? The best defense was having a good offense. He'd pretend he didn't know the portal master's identity and wait the man out. If Sterling reacted in a favorable manner, Xavier would reveal his own nature and plead his case. At least then he could guarantee Sophia's safety. I'm most definitely not a ferry captain. Sterling paused 3 feet from Xavier, his eyes narrowed. I can see you're acquainted with Miss Rains, which is surprising enough since she doesn't go out, but what I'm particularly interested in is who you are. I am. His mind whirled over possible fictional names. Francis Denali. Xavier executed a small bow, then extended a hand in greeting. Sophia is my current love interest. He withdrew his hand when it became apparent Sterling wouldn't shake it. I'm afraid you came upon us at the tail end of a bit of harmless skinny dipping. We were on the way back to our hotel when you startled us, or rather Sophia. His gaze slid to her stony visage. How long would she remain as a statue? His heart went out to her. Skinny dipping would be out of character for her. The Sophia I know has the confidence and bravado of a sea mollusk. His dark eyes flicked over her immobile form, his expression thoughtful. I issued a summons to Miss Rains. When she ignored it, I had no choice but to come searching for her. His gaze focused on Xavier. Now I know why. It's true. I cannot leave her. She feels the same, I'm sure. Xavier studied the man from the tip of his black, fashion-forward styled hair to the soles of his expensive Italian leather loafers. A worthy opponent, and very deadly. Waves of checked power radiated from the man, causing Xavier's natural confidence to sag. No wonder Sophia was constantly afraid. He shored up his testosterone, allowed his anger to increase slightly. Eventually he'd meet the portal master and demand his attention, but now was not the time, especially with Sophia in such dire straits. If you aren't the ferry captain, what's your purpose here? He traced his goatee with a finger. What is your opinion on the unfortunate tendency of Miss Rains to become a stone statue? Sterling's black eyes flashed. I'd imagine it could put a damper on any amorous activities you had planned. A fishing expedition. Xavier stifled a chuckle. Obviously the portal master had no clue to his paranormal status. The far-off blaring of a horn alerted him the ferry was on its way. What would happen if Sophia shifted into her human form while Sterling was still present? A fierce wave of protectiveness shook him. Never again would the man harm her. He'd make it his mission to release her from whatever bonds Sterling held her. Xavier crossed his arms over his bare chest. What Sophia is or isn't doesn't have any bearing on my opinion of her. He shrugged. It's not for me to judge her by the type of being she is. We all have our faults or strengths, but it's how we choose to view our abnormalities that set us apart. And you met Sophia where? Sterling's eyes glittered as the ferry pulled closer to the dock. As far as I know, she doesn't socialize. You know only a sliver of Sophia's life. Xavier flexed his hands at his side. I met Sophia on the way home from the grocery store where she works. Sterling adjusted the crimson tie, his only homage to color in his otherwise dark ensemble. He cleared his throat. You should be advised that Miss Rains works for me. I'm Sterling Abignon, and I sit on the immortal court for the mortal realm. Should your revelation have some special connotation for me? Xavier's heart slammed against his chest. The need to plead his case warred with his duty to protect Sophia. I'm not easily impressed by titles. I tend to put much more stock in the caliber of the man. Impressed or not, it would behoove you to cease your association with her. She has no time on her calendar for a pointless flirtation with a human. Then how fortunate I'm a werewolf. Is that a threat? He tamped the urge to lunge at the portal master and followed his question with a growl. His canine teeth tingled, signaling his need to shift. How you choose to interpret my comment is your business. If I find you in Sophia's company again, I'll make it my business to be sure your life is filled with unpleasantness. With one last glance at the docking ferry, Sterling vanished into the air. As if my life is free of complications on a normal day. Xavier frowned. He spared another look at Sophia. Ever so slightly she blinked. I believe he was trying to intimidate me, dear heart. The captain of the ferry jumped to the dock. Sir, if you need the ferry, it will be running in 10 minutes. Gotta make it stop at the little captain's room. Xavier nodded at the burly man. The sailor disappeared into one of the wooden buildings on the dock. Sophia, any time would be ideal to transform back. We're the only people around. He had serious doubts as to his ability to haul her stony self onto the boat. He stepped close, traced her rock-hard cheek with a thumb, willing her to relax enough to shift. If you don't burst out of your prison, I swear I'll take this towel off. With a cough, Sophia stumbled into his arms, pliant and slightly covered in cement dust. Please don't. What will the ferry captain think? Where have you been? I called your cell phone for an hour but went straight to voicemail. Mona's shrill, hysterical voice shot through Sophia's brain. Don't start. Sophia sighed and navigated around her roommate. It's been a bad afternoon. She marched into her bedroom and slammed the door. Sterling dropped by looking for you. Like I care. Especially since he showed up at the golf course. She ignored the muffled voice on the other side of the door and pulled on a pair of jeans and a sweater. An overbearing friend was the last thing she wanted to deal with after the homicidal mermaid. Sterling wasn't amused to find you gone. And where did your clothes go? Mona continued to knock on the door until Sophia wrenched it open in frustration. Geez, Mona, annoy much? I thought Xavier told you to make yourself scarce? Do you want me to have him reiterate his request? No. I was worried about you. I'm fine. Sophia moved down the hall into the living room and then slumped into a sofa. My phone doesn't work because it was underwater. She pulled her soggy purse toward her, then dumped out the damp contents. Why did you go swimming in October? It's pretty cold out there with the breeze. And where is Xavier? Mona toyed with the fringe on a pillow. Frown. Turned down her petal pink mouth. You didn't argue again, did you? Why can't you cut the guy a break? I think he really likes you. I like him too, but I have to keep him safe. We've been arguing off and on all day. She glared at Mona over the tops of her glasses. I assume Xavier went home to grab some clothes. He lost his when we went into a lake to meet with a mermaid. You ditched him, didn't you? A tiny twinge of guilt moved through Sophia's stomach. Her cheeks heated. Yes. Once we returned to the country club from Renn's place, I told Xavier I needed something to drink. He left to get it, so I grabbed a terry cloth robe from the spa and ran. It was why she ran that was important. Seeing Sterling then turning into a statue while her boss interrogated Xavier had jogged another memory. The last time she'd transformed into stone was in Sterling's office a couple months ago. She'd brought a fresh victim in ready to have the person processed when Sterling launched into a tirade about her lagging quota. The poor man she dragged and shook in her grasp, swearing he wasn't a freak. When Sophia had attempted to soothe the man's fears and whispered that he'd be in a better place in a few days, Sterling went ballistic. Sophia lost her nerve and her calm and had no choice but to let the shift take her. The human threw himself at Sterling's feet and babbled about not understanding what was going on. Apparently, by that time the portal master's patience with the whole thing had worn away because he fried the man to a crisp with his red lightning. Then, stepping calmly over the burnt patch of carpet, he buzzed his receptionist to come in. When the woman did so, he threw a satisfied smirk at Sophia and toasted the woman into dust as well. Hours later, Sophia had relaxed enough to return to her human form. Sterling had waited on her the whole time. You saw what I did to people you aren't intimately familiar with. Just imagine what I can do to those you love. Now, don't disappoint me again. The next one you bring in here had better be legitimate paranormal. Otherwise, there will be another death. More than anything, she couldn't let Sterling know about Xavier. That's why she'd run. Mona stifled a squeak of alarm recalled her back to the present. Why? Xavier will protect you. Maybe, but who will protect him? She shrugged. What else was I supposed to do? Sticking with me is a bad idea for both of us. An image of the werewolf's naked body surfaced. Sophia's core throbbed in response. She would not succumb to his charm. It was too dangerous for personal safety and peace of mind. But, damn, there were a few things she wanted to do with certain pieces of his anatomy. What's that? Mona leaned forward when Sophia captured the red scale between her fingers. Did the mermaid give it to you? She did grudgingly. She wanted to kill me. Xavier persuaded her not to. She held the scale up to the light, fascinated by the glowing swirling pattern of the scale. Isn't it beautiful? Mona nodded. Is it part of the recipe to break the gypsy curse? Yes. I forgot to give it back to Xavier. Sophia tucked the scale into the pocket of her jeans, then stood. I'm going to bed. It's been a long day. It's not even 7 o'clock yet. Mona shrugged. Suit yourself. The imps are in lockdown. Frida is stowed in the vegetable crisper, and Calvin is sulking upstairs. I'll see you in the morning. The damn woman had gone too far this time. He'd spent an hour searching the grounds of the country club only to be told by a passing golf pro that a woman matching Sophia's description had left 40 minutes before. She'd given him the slip and took the mermaid scale with her. He'd waited several hours until he could calm down enough to think coherently. There was no use showing up in a white-hot rage when she'd simply toss him out in the yard. Of course, getting roughed up by Sterling's posse had delayed him as well. Now Xavier pounded on her front door, using both fists as an angry growl. Escaped him. She needed to understand their future together wasn't a joke. After a few minutes under his barrage, the door wrenched open and Sophia's customary glare greeted him. This had better be an emergency, she hissed. It's going to be an emergency if you ever attempt to waylay me again. I did it for your own good. He waited only as long as it took for her to lock the front door, then he grabbed her arm, frog-marched her into her bedroom, and shut the door behind him. I'm drawing a line, Sophia. Do not cross it. From here on out you're under my protection. You're mine. Period. You won't separate yourself from me again. What's your problem? She struggled, but his strength was more than enough to keep her in line. It's the middle of the night. It's hardly the middle. Nearly midnight. My problem, Xavier lowered his voice as he shook her arm, is that your pal Sterling paid me an unannounced visit with a few of his goons this evening after I went home. Her quick intake of breath echoed in the silence. Are you hurt? Sophia lightly brushed his cheek with her free hand. Her fingers tickled his stubble-covered skin and sent jagged needles of molten need through him. Did he suspect anything? No. I made sure to be careful and unflustered. By the time the portal master left, he was more perturbed than I. Xavier felt her rapid pulse beneath his fingers, smelled her fear and the sweeter scent of her arousal. I stuck with my story from earlier. Had to backpedal a bit and explain I simply picked up clothes in order to join you at a hotel later. Good to know. She gave him a wide yawn. Damn it, Sophia. Xavier growled, pushing her against the door, then planted his hands on either side of her head. Why must you be so glib? I'm not being glib, and by the way, who uses that word anymore? I'm just absorbing the facts as you relate them to me. My brain doesn't function well in the middle of the night. He fought down the urge to kiss her lips that mocked him from such close quarters. I understand you wish to shield me from Sterling. He's a rather unpleasant individual. What I don't understand is why he's so interested in you. You're a gatekeeper, but he's acting as if you're his lover. Ease closer. Is that the reason he followed you? How dare you? Sophia slapped him and the sound reverberated in the small room. I'd rather cut off my own hands than allow that man to touch me. She shoved his chest, but he encircled her wrists with his fingers. Violence against women is wrong, she spat out between clenched teeth. You were the one who slapped me. Laughter threaded through his voice. He released his hold as desire churned in his gut. Her terror wafted through his nostrils. He hated himself for making her feel afraid of him. Sophia. He massaged his stinging cheek. It was justified. I apologize for my comment. I'm just as puzzled as you are about Sterling's motives. She patted across the tiny room, then snuggled under the quilt on her bed. Now go away. It's too early to deal with you. That won't be possible. He longed to join her beneath the blankets, wanted to indulge in the delights her lips promised. Why? It was a whine. He glanced at her, but the darkness hid her expression from view. We need to make an early start if we're going to find the dragon's tooth. Fine, but at least let me sleep for a few more hours. I have a feeling the next part of your quest is going to be highly unpleasant. You could be right. He made no move to leave her room. I was serious before. I don't intend to abandon you. We're linked, so you better get used to me being here. I can see that. Frustration filled her sigh. Evangeline's old room is available. I'll pass the remainder of the night here, especially now Sterling is mobile. I want to be around the general area, and your bed works best for a variety of reasons. Sophia sat up. You're going to become a wolf, aren't you? When he nodded, she gasped. Can I watch? No. You wouldn't like it, and besides, I'm hungry. He perched on the edge of her bed. I'll be careful not to raise the crime watch people. Unable to help himself, he stroked a hand through her hair. She shivered but didn't pull away. Do what you want, just don't eat any people. Sophia yawned and lay back against the pillows. And don't make a mess. People get a little antsy if there are bloodstains on the street. And you don't answer the door to anyone but me. He slipped from the room, wondering if she'd even heard his order. Consciousness came to Sophia by way of roughness on her cheek, followed by a trail of moisture and a weight pressed into her ribcage. She squinted at the clock on the bedside table. Not yet 3 a.m. She groaned. The heaviness on her chest turned out to be the solid body of Xavier in wolf form. Ugh, you have the worst morning breath of anyone I've ever known. She pushed his muzzle away from her nose, effectively ending his impromptu face licking. I don't know where that tongue has been. A soft whine was the only response. As long as you persist in deporting yourself as a wolf, then I'll catch up on my sleep. She shoved his warm, furry canine body from her chest, then turned onto her side. I refused to play chauffeur to a dog. His head was surprisingly heavy on her hip as he rearranged himself. I also refused to snuggle up to an animal. I already told you I don't like dogs. Then why not snuggle up to me? Tremors of excitement snaked up her spine. Xavier wrapped an arm around her waist to pull her body flesh against his clearly human and unequivocally aroused form. How did you shift so quickly? I didn't get to see it. Sophia held her breath as he traced small circles on her stomach. She fumbled on the nightstand for her glasses. They fell to the carpet when Xavier pinched her hip. I'm honoring your request to not give you any hard evidence I'm a werewolf. His whispered response tickled her ear and stirred tendrils of her hair. As long as you don't see me shift from one form into another, you should be fine. I appreciate that. It makes life 200 times easier. Scratch that. Being in such close proximity to him was not making life easier. Every nerve ending in her body tingled with suppressed energy. What are you doing here? In my bed. Trying to sleep, but someone's talking is having a detrimental effect on that act. Rotating to face him, Sophia propped her head on her hand, while she traced a finger over his goatee-covered chin. The hair was soft and beckoned a deeper investigation. Why are you trying to sleep at all? Didn't you want to get an early start? She swept her gaze over the shredded fragments of clothing that clung to his body. What happened to your suit? An unhappy side effect of becoming my wolf counterpart, I'm afraid. Explain to me why we were both naked after the stint in the pseudomare kingdom. Xavier sighed in exasperation. Must you know everything all at once? That would be helpful. She reined in her desire to touch the golden hair on his chest. Tell me this instead. Why are you here? To find a dragon. He grinned and his white teeth flashed in the gloom. As for shape-shifting, it depends on what, where, and how you shift. Sometimes, when I regain my human form, I find myself fully clothed. Other times I'm naked. When that happens, I either assume the clothing of my last victim or I do this. What, appear in women's bedrooms looking like a survivor from a war? No, he snapped his fingers. Loose-fitting linen pants covered his lower half. Along with the ability to shift into a wolf, I retain extremely limited Magical abilities. Lucky you, but that still doesn't answer my question. What are you really doing here? It can't be just because I'm a gatekeeper. There are other ways to be taken to the portal master if that's your intention. His eyes flashed. She ignored him. I don't mind helping you break the curse. I want to know your motives before we go any further. You're very intelligent. You should apply to the immortal court. Sophia snorted. I want nothing to do with the court once my birthright is annulled, if you're true to your word. She squeaked in surprise when he pulled her on top of him so she straddled his torso. I always keep my word, no matter the cost. He skimmed her legs and then shoved his hands under her simple nightshirt of faded blue cotton. He brushed his fingers over her hips. I'm here because you're my mate, whether you believe me right now or not. He continued to trek northward until he gently cupped her breasts. You accept this mate stuff because Hannah had a vision? She could be lying. She could, but that doesn't explain my immediate attraction for you or yours. For me. I know you felt it. I can see it in your eyes. Maybe. Sophia licked dry lips as her heart pounded out a frantic rhythm. I'm not easily impressed with men like you. Stabs of pleasure shot through her stomach when he brushed his thumbs across her nipples. She gasped and clutched his shoulders, wishing he would move his attention to other parts of her body. I find you irritating and self-absorbed. You know that isn't true. Your happiness, your well-being is first and foremost in my mind. Xavier tugged her down so she was draped over his chest, her face mere inches from his. I never said I was perfect or a saint. I'm neither a hero nor a martyr. I'm merely a man with a curse. He fingered the mermaid scale tied to black satin ribbon and strung around her neck. Nice. Bauble. But why me? His eyes twinkled with laughter. Sophia's lips tilted with an answering smile. I'm dangerous to know. I could turn you over to Sterling at any time. My life isn't my own as long as I'm bound to him. She moved her fingers over his shoulders and felt the hardness of muscle. Warmth collected between her legs. It was becoming much too difficult to resist him. That could very well be true. In the meantime, you're simply a woman who wants to be understood. You crave companionship and security, and I'll give both to you. He pressed his lips to hers, then pulled away. Tracing his cheek with a forefinger, she frowned. I'm not at such a trusting place, Xavier. If she allowed herself to care for him and she turned him over to Sterling, she'd hate herself beyond measure. Sophia brushed her lips across his, tasting an unknown sweetness, wanting to take that next step, but fear held her back. I don't want a daily reminder of my treachery. I wouldn't want to remember. Self-preservation is a very lonely place. In one fluid movement he flipped her onto her back. You can try to shut yourself away from the world, but you'll find life is excruciating in length. With a soft sigh, she let him caress her body as her insides quivered with desire. She stirred under his fingers. You're very persistent in your argument. She arched against him when he closed his teeth on a taut nipple. Sophia gripped his shoulders, her breath coming in short gasps. It's been a long time. You're wavering, and in that I have at least won a small victory. I won't push you. Xavier smiled against her lips. But when I want an item, I pursue it with single-minded determination, especially when the item in question is meant for me anyway. She tangled her fingers in the hair of his chest and pressed a kiss to his shoulder, breathing in his signature spicy oaky scent. I'm not a piece of art to be possessed. No, you're much more valuable, and you need to believe that. If you want me to believe in all this mate stuff, you're going to have to allow me breathing room. Possessiveness can only go so far. I need time to think about being anyone's mate, yours or someone else's. Xavier growled, and the sound tickled her already sensitive skin. You have another man? No, just you. She held his gaze, shadowed in the darkness. I'm willing to accept the possibility of you being my mate. I'm asking you to be patient. Her eyelids prickled with tears. She furiously blinked them away. She hadn't cried since Evangeline and refused to do so now. Once Xavier got what he wanted from her, would he move on to greener pastures? Were they really mates? Or was it a story he told to get her into bed and help him with the quest? Or would he leave once he was free from the curse, whichever came first? She didn't want to know the answer to those questions for fear her heart wouldn't be able to withstand the pain. Xavier, Words died as he manipulated her lips, his tongue searching every inch of her mouth. He pulled away to stare at her. We'll revisit the subject at a later time. You have my word. Why? Her pulse raced and her core throbbed with unfulfilled need. I think. You're a tease, Xavier Layton. She desired him, that much was certain. Would she come to love him? Already. He'd wormed his way under her skin, regardless of how much she pushed him away. His soft laugh filled the small room. Perhaps, but I find the thought of making love to you with an audience slightly distasteful. I need to do a better job of staking my claim around here. With a shiver of thwarted anticipation, she followed his gaze. Calvin lurked in the heavy shadows near the ceiling. Why, my lady, would you pick him for a consort? The ghost asked in an injured tone. What the hell, Calvin? Sophia glared. You're a ghost. That means you have no solid parts. No matter how much you want to be with me, it's never going to happen, got it? If I want to do the nasty, I'll pick Xavier, not you, okay? She didn't want to delve into why else she'd choose the werewolf to satisfy her needs beyond having solid body parts. Calvin vanished without answering. The romance of the moment was lost. Chapter 13. Xavier rolled his eyes and wished for the 1000th time that Sophia would shut up. She'd done nothing but babble ever since they'd set out before the dawn. He couldn't concentrate. For the love of the gods, woman, give me 2 seconds of peace. His knees ached as he crouched on the cool metal stairs. Surrey, your royal grouchiness. She smacked his shoulder. Remind me again why we're on this foolish mission. Her whispered question echoed eerily off the walls of the stairwell. He'll kill us both if he finds us. Then it is best to not be found. He glanced at his watch. 5 o'clock in the morning on the 28th day of October. They had snuck into the immortal court offices and were currently hiding in the stairwell. If it had been up to him, they would have gone directly to Sterling's office, but Sophia's skittishness gave him second thoughts. So he decided to make a brief camp and wait for the night watch to make his rounds. Are you crazy? She poked his back with an insistent forefinger. Perhaps, but one of us has to be. He looked over his shoulder, taking in the lines of worry and fatigue on her face, and then returned his gaze to the floor below. In order to locate a dragon, we need to go to the source. Since Sterling is the only person who holds the relocation records for all paranormal beings in the Elias Mortal Realm Cooperative, I thought we'd get the information from the horse's mouth, so to speak. 2 minutes later, the sweep of a flashlight cut through the shadowy open room below, followed by the dark form of the security guard. His heavy boots thumped on the marble flooring in time with his labored breathing. Sophia pressed tighter against his back. Her heat seeped through the black turtleneck he wore and warmed his skin. His groin twitched in response to her nearness, and he wished again they weren't mired in a near-impossible quest. Her quick inhalation of breath alerted him that she wished to speak. Hush! She laid a hand on his shoulder, squeezed gently. Is he gone? Xavier risked a glance through the wrought iron railing. Yes. How long before the next pass? We should have 30 minutes, give or take. Good. We'll be in and out well before that time. He stood. Let's do this. He moved up the remaining steps to Sterling's office door, the glass window pane cold to the touch. Xavier tried the doorknob, turned easily under his hand. The bastard is so arrogant, he probably thought no one would dare break in. Xavier. Sophia poked him again. I don't feel comfortable here in the daylight, and I really don't feel comfortable here now. She followed him into the office. Our criminal activity will be quick and painless. He squeezed her fingers, hating himself anew for putting her into danger on his behalf. I'll look through these files and you take the cabinet over there. The chrome legs of the chairs winked in the nearly non-existent light from the stairwell. Sophia removed a small penlight from a pocket of her short black skirt. What are we searching for? She eased open the first drawer, then ran her index finger over the folder tabs. Dragons, wyverns, dinosaurs, anything of that nature. We just need one name. Then we can leave. The thin white beam of Xavier's penlight sliced through the darkness, briefly illuminating the files she worked on. Less talk, more searching. These files are all under the first and last name of the person or creature, instead of their specific paranormal case structure. It's impossible. Don't think about it, just do it. Xavier growled low in his throat. Randomly pull a few files and maybe we'll get lucky. You can always slip the files into the refile trays for the clerks to replace later. He made sure she did as he asked before turning his attention to his own drawer. After yanking out 2 files, he quietly snapped it closed. Come on, just a few more. A few more. Her soft parroting of his words didn't set his mind at ease. Fear quavered in her voice. As she shut her last drawer, an unmistakable noise filtered into the office. Oh no. Oh no, what? You can't leave me hanging with that. He glanced at her, saw her round eyes reflecting fear, and laid a hand on her shoulder. What is it? The elevator squealed as it brought someone up to the floor. She clutched his arm. Someone's coming. So I gathered. He extinguished his penlight. Sophia did the same. He froze when the elevator pinged at the floor and the doors slid smoothly open. We need somewhere to hide, Xavier whispered. Had his time teasing fate finally run out? We'll be caught, I'll get fired and you'll be sent to the demon realm, and then I'll have to explain to Sterling why I'm so incompetent. And then, Sophia. He lifted an eyebrow, intent on breaking through her terror. It's too early to worry. He cast a glance about the darkened room. Think. We need a quick hiding place. Sprinting across the floor, he tried the door to what he could only assume was a coat closet. Damn. Locked. Footsteps rang on the marble floor below Sterling's office. His heart pounded so frantically he thought it would rip out of his chest. Is there a utility closet or something like that? She fumbled at another doorknob. Yes, hurry. If it's Sterling, we're toast. His heart went out to her. The poor thing was nearly climbing the walls from fear. There's no reason to panic. He shoved her forward into the closet, then closed the door behind him. Let's see who it is first. In Sterling's office, the darkness glowed green from the exit signs at the stairwell. In the closet, it was pitch black. Xavier could barely discern his hand in front of his face, couldn't imagine what Sophia must be feeling. How are you doing? Concern for her surged to the forefront of his mind. Not good. She emitted a few gasping breaths. I have to get out of here. Don't think about claustrophobia. You're better than the situation. Sweetness. He looked in her direction. Thankfully, his wolf sight kicked in. Sophia huddled by one wall, her face pale, her eyes rounded. You'll get through this. Come over to me. The tiny closet appeared to be 3 feet by 3 feet and contained an upturned bucket in one corner as well as a lightweight carpet sweeper and an old-fashioned broom. Wooden shelving lined 2 walls above there. Quiet. Outside, the door to Sterling's office opened. Heavy footsteps invaded the room. A thin line of light sliced the darkness from under the closet door. Whoever was in the office had flipped on the overhead fluorescents. He heard a rustle at the back of the closet and wished Sophia would remain calm. She reached around him to fumble for the doorknob. Xavier stifled an annoyed growl and pinned her against the opposite wall. Let me out. Her breathing was heavy and rapid. Settle down. He removed the files from her hands and placed them on one of the shelves above his head, then he wrapped his arms around, pulling her close. Concentrate on the sound of my voice. He buried his nose in her hair and inhaled the floral scent. Everything will be fine, we won't be caught, and after it's all over, we can thumb our noses at Sterling. He kept his voice a calm monotone as he stroked his hands down her back. Don't leave me. Hysteria tinged her whisper. She gathered his turtleneck in her fists. Never. Outside the closet, the occupant of the office moved furniture. Xavier whispered a steady stream of comforting words and soothing sounds into her ear, being sure to maintain contact with her. I'm your mate. You'll never be alone. What if we're caught? What if we're turned over to Sterling? What if? With a soft grunt, Xavier pressed his mouth to hers, nibbling her bottom lip. Hush. Stay here. He detached her hands and pressed his ear to the door. A loud hum blotted out anything else that lurked outside. He couldn't identify the sound. What is that? Sophia moved behind him, her fingers resting on his back. He ignored the shockwaves that coursed through him at the light touch. A vacuum cleaner. It's the cleaning staff. Ah, see, it is nothing. Xavier turned and enfolded her in his arms once. Again. No need to worry. He pressed his lips against her forehead. Worry is what I do. A shiver shook her. If Sterling captures us, I'll find some way out of the mines and locate you wherever you are, providing I'm alive. He gathered her closer. It won't come to that, but I appreciate the sentiment. Even in such a dire situation, she still wished to protect him. He swallowed past the sudden tightness in his throat. Thank you. Her scent filled the stifling air of the closet. Gardenias, lily of the valley, honeysuckle. What was it that blended so sweetly with the vanilla? When the cleaning person moved on to the other side of Sterling's office, he released a sigh of frustration. How long do you suppose we'll be stuck here? Sophia's words warmed through the cashmere of his shirt. I couldn't say. His knees wobbled when she glided her hands around his neck, and her fingers tangled in his curls. Perhaps you should enjoy the time away from your house guests. True, and we were interrupted earlier. Indeed. He couldn't think when she stroked the sensitive spot beneath his left ear. Thank you for being the calm one. She trailed her fingertips over his chest. His muscles tightened. I'm not good in a crisis situation. Don't underestimate yourself, Sophia. In a crisis, people can surprise you. We all have untapped wells of courage inside us, waiting for the right moment to surface. Need sliced through his gut when one of her hands drifted lower, toward his waistband. Bravery comes in all forms. He stood still, afraid if he moved the moment would shatter. Let's change the subject. The steady hum of the vacuum filled the empty spaces. Xavier decided to see how willing she would be to a bit of light flirtation to pass the time. Anything specific? He released her hair from the ponytail elastic, then massaged her scalp. Obviously, there's not much we can do in this small space. Her warmth turned him on, made his temperature rise, pressed his erection against his zipper. We could revisit the subject you brought up earlier. A sigh swallowed her words. Her pulse increased beneath his fingertips. Unless you'd rather not. She smiled like the vixen she was. Surprise ricocheted through his chest at her teasing. More minx than Gatekeeper. It seemed Sophia had a wild side he was eager to explore. What did you have in mind? He cupped her face in his hands, brushed a thumb over her bottom lip. We'd have to be quiet. I'm sure it won't be a problem. She tugged the hem of his cashmere turtleneck from his pants and ran her hands up the length of his torso. Everywhere she touched left flames of heat so intense he expected to be burned at any moment. I want you. A pardon from the gods would never sound as sweet as those 4 little words. What kind of a man would I be if I didn't indulge my lady? He claimed her lips, slanting his mouth over hers, swept his tongue along the crease of her lips. I must warn you, this act may not be as memorable as it could be were we given a proper bed. Sophia's scorching kisses on his chest banished the thin thread of insecurity. You talk far too much, werewolf. Her whisper penetrated his brain, robbed him of all thought. And you tempt me beyond sanity. Xavier lifted her and maneuvered her back against the wall. She wrapped her legs around his waist and gripped his shoulders. I've wanted to do this since the moment I met you, since I knew you were mine. He took another kiss. The sweet scent of her arousal filled the air, spurring him onward. Damn, you feel good. He ground his erection into her softness, anxious to relieve the tension. A faint sound from beyond the office sank into his desire-flooded consciousness, jarring for the simple fact that it didn't belong. He ignored it in favor of nuzzling the hollow of her throat. Xavier. She pushed his shoulders. Don't rush, Sophia, we aren't animals. His chuckle was low and soft as he hiked her skirt up around her hips, slipped his fingers beneath the elastic of her panties, brushing his fingertips over her pubic hair. Well, at least you aren't Xavier. Sophia. He pressed a searing kiss on her mouth, hard enough to draw blood from a tiny cut inflicted by one of his sharp canine teeth. He licked the wound, tasted the spicy sweetness of her life essence, glad he didn't hear the sound again. He wanted this woman like he'd wanted nothing else in life. Slipping his fingers under her sweater, he molded his hands around her full breasts, teasing the pebbled nipples. Your skin is so soft, he marveled, then pressed his forehead to hers, his breathing labored. He lifted his head, his hand stilling. Did you hear that? Yes. She shook her head. I thought I heard something a few minutes ago, but then we were. Do you think it could be him? Tremors moved from her body to his. There's someone else in the office now. With regret, Xavier released her. But not before he let her slide down his body until she regained her footing. His raging case of lust would have to wait. Quiet. He moved stealthily to the door and laid an ear against the metal. I want to hear too. She nudged him in the ribs with an elbow. He refused to budge. Is that? She rubbed her hands over her arms with jerky movements. Hush. He felt her fear as sharp as if he owned it himself. Sophia laid an ear to the door. It's Sterling. What are we going to do? Steady. Let's be patient and see the drama play out. Xavier squeezed her hand, wanting to put her fears at ease. Deep down he knew they were trapped. Cracking open the closet door, he saw the glass and chrome structure that served as the portal master's desk. Sterling rifled through a stack of contracts on the corner and glanced in the cleaning person's direction. Hello, Alberto. Don't mind me. I'm not here to work. I need to pick up some paperwork, then I'll be on my way. The cleaning man's response was indiscernible, and Sterling didn't say anything more. The sweat coating Xavier's back turned to ice when the portal master looked up from his contracts and slowly scanned the room. Alberto, has there been anyone in this office since you've been here? Xavier held tight to Sophia's hand as the cleaning man answered in the negative. Her terror flooded the cramped space. Frustration from the situation held him captive. Did you see anyone on the staircase on your way up? Sterling's dark eyes took in every nook, cranny, and shadow of the office. Is someone on this floor? Again, Alberto confirmed he was alone. Sterling's gaze lingered in the general direction of the supply closet, then moved away. Very well. Carry on, but if you see any strange activity, please report it at once. I have a strange suspicion all is not what it seems. It never is. Xavier quietly pulled the door shut. He slumped against the wall, exhausted, and hauled Sophia against him. That was close. The hum of the vacuum began once more as Alberto finished the last of Sterling's office. Too close. She shivered. How can we be certain Sterling won't be lurking in the building by the time we want to leave? We cannot be certain of anything, Sophia. We can remain vigilant and have a bit of luck that we'll escape unharmed. He pressed a kiss to her hair, content to keep her in his arms. You must trust me sometime. How many more narrow escapes can we get away with before Sterling reels in the net that surrounds us? Hysteria laced her voice. You need to leave. Don't say it. Let me remind you once more. You belong to me and I to you. There's no point in trying to ditch me. He absently stroked a finger over the front of her sweater, grinning when one of her nipples sprang to attention at the slight touch. I'm going to play the cards I have been dealt. You're the boss. She settled against him, obviously willing to wait. Damn straight. 15 agonizing minutes later, the office remained quiet. Then the distant drone of Alberto's vacuum sounded somewhere on the floor below. Sophia tugged at his hand. Come on. At this point, I need a cup of coffee. Xavier gathered the file folders and exited the closet, blinking as his eyes adjusted to the dim light of Sterling's office. I'm so famished I could eat a person. She gawked at him. Are you serious? I thought we discussed this issue. By the gods, she was such fun to tease. He looked forward to a lifetime of such activities. You're going to have to learn how to take a joke. Chapter 14. Many different styles of shape-shifting or transformations are referred to in popular literature today. One is the bodily alteration, where the human shape physically changes into the animal or inanimate object. Depending on what the subject is changing into, the body will shift, stretch, compress, grow fur or scales, or expand altogether. This type of shifting is often a slow and painful process, and articles of clothing are usually lost or destroyed. Sophia snapped the book on lycanthropy closed and stared at Xavier. Any luck? She reached over the middle console of the Werewolf's SUV and poked him with a forefinger. Well, after breaking out of Sterling's office, they'd driven a couple of blocks over and parked in the relatively empty parking lot of a superstore. Xavier shook his head, stroking his goatee. Nothing yet. Give me a file and I'll help out. Maybe the search can go a bit faster. He handed over a manila folder and Sophia propped it open on her lap. This guy looks promising. A shiver rocked her body when his arm jostled hers as he leaned over to look at the paperwork. Says here he's a lawyer now, but originally came from Demon Realm. If that doesn't suggest a dragon, I don't know what will. Xavier chuckled. Just because a person is an attorney does not necessarily make them evil or a dragon. He closed his file and added it to the small stack on the dashboard. What else does the dossier say? Divorced, 40 years old, goes by the name Braden. She ran a hand through her hair and sighed. His office is supposedly located in Vincent Towers. Should we call for an appointment? I don't want a dragon masquerading as an attorney to know in advance I'm looking for him. He shifted positions, rolled his shoulders and straightened his turtleneck. Ready to go? Now? I haven't eaten yet. When she met his intense gaze, Sophia quickly dropped her eyes. His overt sexiness unnerved her. Can we pick something up on the way? As if to emphasize the fact, her stomach grumbled. Do you have to constantly worry about your stomach? He jammed a black fedora over his curls. Well, excuse me if I can't just eat a passing mailman. She glared before rubbing her scratchy eyes. I don't guess you'll want to stop by the apartment so I can take out my contact lenses. Not really. You have beautiful eyes. They should never be hidden behind glasses. Doesn't matter, but thank you. You're still going to have to because I need lens solution in my case. I can't just wear them all night. Xavier uttered a slight growl. Fine. I'll stop at a drugstore so you can take care of your issues. If only that were possible with one stop. What she said was, thanks. I knew you'd see it my way. He started the engine, letting the vehicle idle for a moment. Anything else about the attorney we should know before going in? Let me check. Sophia rifled through the few papers, then sucked in a breath. People refer to him as the dragon because he wins every case he works on. He's feared within his company, admired among his colleagues, and one of the most sought-after bachelors in the city. I'll drop you off at the apartment and handle him myself. The low, silky tone of his voice brooked no argument. Call Mona and let her know. I don't think so, alpha boy. Sophia snorted. Anything you can do, I can do. She shoved her hands into the pockets of her denim jacket and slumped in the seat. Besides, I'm not afraid of a lawyer. It's ridiculous to fear someone based on rumors. He's just a man. She whipped out her cell phone and texted Mona regarding their plans. He cleared his throat. Regardless of your foray into bravery, I've vowed to protect you. You're staying at home. What the hell? This isn't life on the frontier. Her glare lost strength when he reached out to caress her thigh, moving his fingers beneath her skirt, dangerously close to brushing against more sensitive parts of her anatomy. What next? Keep me barefoot and pregnant? Is that a valid option? He glided his hand up a fraction of an inch to rub against the cotton crotch of her panties. He gave a soft laugh when she squirmed. I've been attempting to see you naked for a couple of days now. Mum. Tingles radiated up from her core to chase a wave of delicious warmth through her insides. I get that you want to keep me safe. I understand why. You don't want to put me into danger, but if we both go, we can get the job done sooner. She ran a hand over his arm to pat him on the cheek. Work first, naked later. Is that a promise? His golden eyes held hers captive. She sighed as her resistance to him crumbled. Yes, it's a promise. Sooner or later, she'd end up in the werewolf's bed. And for her sake, she hoped it was sooner, or else she'd spontaneously combust. How long do you think he'll keep us waiting? Sophia glanced at the carriage clock on the receptionist's desk and sighed. We've been here for 30 minutes. She thumbed through an outdated magazine before slapping it down on the table. It's almost 4 o'clock. A growl signaled Xavier's annoyance. No matter how often you mention the time, I still won't know how long we'll be kept here. Practice patience. You're just as irritated as I am. He drummed long, elegant fingers on the brim of his fedora. Admit it. I'm aggravated, but what would you have me do? Eat the receptionist? No. A tiny smile lifted the corners of his mouth. While we're waiting, answer me this. How well do you know your friend Mona? What are you getting at? She stared at him and shifted in her chair. I think I know her pretty well. A curl of anxiety sketched through her gut. I rescued her from a mugger 3 years ago, then invited her to stay with me. When I found out she didn't have family here. Why? You might find this interesting. Xavier held out a newspaper. Read it. Glancing at the logo for the Off-Realms Gazette, Sophia frowned. Was this lying out in full view? That was strange. usually subscribers of the newspaper, were not eager for mere humans to be privy to the news occurring beyond the mortal realm. It was folded inside a magazine. Someone obviously was interrupted. This will be a problem. She scanned the photo of 4 people, a man, a woman, and 2 teenage boys, then moved to the headline, First Family of Messiah in Hiding. Her eyes watered as she read the article. Missing daughter of the first couple sought for questioning. An old grainy picture of Mona accompanied the piece. Damn, I had no idea Mona's family was that important. No wonder she never wants to talk about them. I think the greater problem is what she is running from and why. Xavier brushed at a piece of lint on his pant leg. If she's wanted in any of the realms and the enforcement team comes to collect her, she could conceivably spend time in prison. Before Sophia could answer, the door to the attorney's inner sanctum opened. Piercing green eyes flashed from a face that should grace magazine covers. If you wish to talk with me this afternoon, do it now. I have to be in court in an hour. Sophia opened her mouth and shut it like a fish. Okay. Xavier put a hand on the small of her back as they proceeded into the office. Remember, you belong to me, Sophia. No exceptions. The werewolf strong whisper rang in her ear. She grinned at his barely audible growl. Baiting him was such fun. Don't worry, Wolfman, I can only tolerate one overbearing man in my life at a time. The spacious office was dim and warm. The furniture was massive and heavy, made from dark oak and thick black leather. Thermal-lined drapes of black silk covered the floor-to-ceiling windows behind the desk. As Sophia sank into one of the wingback chairs in front of the desk, she noticed the lit fireplace on the far wall, the heat source. Xavier's growl was the only indication he acknowledged the attorney's presence. Braden Hollister perched on the corner of his desk, and for the second time in 2 minutes Sophia was at a loss for words. A shock of chocolate brown hair fell over his forehead while brilliant eyes stared without emotion. Broad shoulders, muscled arms, and the way his lavender silk shirt clung to his chest like a second skin created dark fantasies in her mind. She caught a vague hint of a washboard stomach under that shirt. Oh! Her lips formed an O of appreciation as she looked her fill until Xavier kicked her in the shin. Why the hell did you do that? Nevertheless, the pain broke the spell. Sophia glared at the werewolf. Mine. He lifted an eyebrow, then turned his attention to the attorney. We need a favor. Her fingers itched to brush the hair from Braden's forehead, but one glance at the hard set to Xavier's lips reminded her of their mission. We need an item of a personal nature from you. Apparently, you haven't done your research. Braden crossed his arms over his chest. I don't do favors. Surely you could make an exception in our case. Tingles crept over her skin when she met the attorney's gaze. It's a matter of life or death. Miss Raines. The lawyer extracted a small leather-bound notebook and a gold pen from his breast pocket. If I made an exception for you, word would get out and all my clients would want the same treatment. Then where would I be? Don't represent charity cases and I don't do favors. Period. At least have the decency to hear us out. Her anger slowly built. Sophia gripped the armrest of the chair so tightly her knuckles showed white. You owe us that. What my mate meant was. Sophia shifted her gaze to the werewolf. If I meant to say a thing, I would have said it. We already covered this. Then stop wasting time. Xavier stroked his goatee. The corners of his lips lifted in a tiny grin. You dither. I do not dither. What the hell does that even mean? You do, you're always. The growl that filled the air didn't come from Xavier. If I may interrupt. This little spat, tell me how it is I could owe you anything. Sophia blinked at the undisguised venom in Braden's silky voice, then transferred her anger from one man to the other. For one, you kept us waiting in your reception area for a huge amount of time, and for another, your office is incredibly warm. She fanned herself with a hand. Shut up, Sophia. I'll handle him. Xavier frowned and sent her a warning glance. Sometimes, Xavier, you can catch more flies with honey rather than vinegar. She turned to the darkly scowling attorney. Are there any other objections, or shall we just get down to business? You don't wish to tangle with me, Miss Raines? She sucked in a breath when Braden swooped in close and rested his hands on the armrests of her chair. She felt Xavier's rage beside her as he jumped to his feet. a snarl wrenching from his chest. Her heart beat frantically. At the very real danger from both men, adrenaline surged through her veins as she stared into the vivid eyes of the attorney. Xavier laid a hand on her shoulder, dug his fingers into her flesh. His touch gave her courage to defy the dragon. Why should I be afraid of you? Contrary to popular belief, attorneys aren't the evil menace they're billed to be. He was so close she could discern the subtle pin striping of his suit jacket, each individual piece of stubble on his cheeks. You're a person like me, and if I were you I'd back off because Xavier's about to attack. Brayden held her gaze for what seemed an interminable length of time before pulling away to perch on his desk. I have underestimated you. She released the breath she held and slid a glance at Xavier. His thunderous expression chilled her skin and shot a thrill down her spine at the same time. His strength and wicked possessiveness made her want to forget everything and burrow into his arms. Forget the quest, forget the curse, forget the birthright, and just take him. Sophia swallowed and looked at Brayden. Maybe next time you won't be so quick to dismiss people. She crossed her legs at the knee and settled her purse on her lap. With a growl that bared his teeth, Xavier seated himself, never taking his eyes from her face. If you two are done flirting, could we get back to the reason for being here? What? She glanced at him in surprise. I'm not flirting. If I was, I certainly wouldn't flirt with a dragon. She intended to bait the attorney. He was too smart to give up a tooth just because they asked him to. She needed to find another way. Damn it, Sophia, it looked like flirting to me. And that isn't acceptable from my mate. He kneaded the brim of his fedora, crushing its form. Just because I'm being friendly to the man doesn't mean I'm flirting. Sophia's cheeks burned. She hated the anger on his face, hated she was the reason for the emotion, but didn't know how to fix the situation. There's a difference between flirting and friendly. I'll not warn you again. I'm the only man you need to concern yourself with. Period. Do you understand? Yes. The whispered word vanished into the emotionally charged air. She squirmed in her seat until she faced the werewolf. His chest heaved with the force of his angst, until the desire and pure lust took over and all she wanted was him. Forget about it, Xavier, it's not worth this. We'll find some other way of lifting the curse. His golden gaze held her captive, his scent surrounded her, owned her, and possessed her. Hers. Suddenly, sitting in the office seemed like an incredible waste of time. Brayden made a sound in his throat that Sophia interpreted as frustration. There's counseling available for people like you too. He coughed. How did you find out I'm a dragon? He retreated behind his desk and settled into his chair with the crunch of leather and the squeak of springs. That isn't common knowledge. It wasn't difficult. She refused to look at Xavier, but the anger that still radiated from him compelled her to lay a restraining hand on his arm. Besides, don't argue with me, girl. There's only one way you could have procured that information. The portal master told you. He pinned them, each of them, with a glare. If there's one thing I will not tolerate, it's a lie. Sophia swallowed and glanced uneasily at Xavier. I can honestly tell. You Sterling had nothing to do with our coming here. A glossy eyebrow rose in surprise. Sterling, huh? You must be intimately acquainted with him. This is an interesting twist. What is it with the two of you? She gritted her teeth. Do I give off some vibe that says I play fast and loose with the portal master? Do I have a sign on my forehead which declares I slept with Sterling? She swept the men with her anger. Tell me. I'm curious to know why you both think the same thing. Both men turned the same look of mild amusement and smugness on her. Did Mr. Layton say something along those lines as well? Brayden grinned as he exchanged a purely male glance with the werewolf. There must have been. Just cause. Xavier stroked his goatee. I accused her early this morning, but since then, we've worked the kinks out of our relationship. She's my mate and no other man has claim to her. He lifted an eyebrow, a challenge to the attorney evident in his hard gaze. Your mate. Interesting. Does that mean you have some hidden paranormal streak? Yourself. The attorney cracked his knuckles. Ack. With a strangled sound, Sophia launched out of her chair to pace in front of the fireplace as fear wrapped around her spine. She needed to distract the dragon. There's so much testosterone in this room, I'm surprised We can all still breathe. Sophia. She stopped pacing as Brayden moved into her path. She hadn't seen him leave his chair. Look, you may be the most powerful attorney in this building, but I refuse to listen to more of your posturing. I already have one overbearing male. I don't need another. Xavier can leave. Malice dripped from the dragon's grin. Not without her. Xavier rose from his chair and moved toward her. I'll stay. Since the reason we need your assistance is for me. That won't be necessary. Brayden moved to his desk, his intense gaze resting on Sophia. I'll speak to her myself. I can handle this. She fought down a thrill of excitement as Xavier wrapped a protective arm around her waist. Remember what I said about breathing room. I'm sure you can, but I'm not leaving, not now, not ever. Xavier. Her chin trembled at his steadfast refusal to abandon her. She met his gaze, willed him to understand. Do you want the item or not? I can do this. Trust me. I do trust you, but it's a bad idea. He leaned in, his lips close to her ear, his scent assaulting her. How do you know he isn't in league with Sterling? It always comes back to him, doesn't it? She wrenched away from his grasp. Tears gathered in her eyes. If you can't trust me, we don't have a relationship. With a sound of exasperation, Brayden pressed the intercom button on his phone. Deirdre, please send security to escort Mr. Layton out of the office. Xavier, what do we do now? Sophia's birthmark flared to life under her clothes. She clutched her arm. Being separated wasn't part of the plan. She kept her voice a whisper, but she wasn't confident the dragon wouldn't hear. I'm not leaving this office, Hollister. Xavier squeezed her hand, then moved toward Brayden with his fists clenched. I remain with Sophia and will fight for that privilege if you provoke me. Now would be a great time to do that whole wolf change thing. She focused on the two men blocking the doorway and quickly closed the space between her and Xavier. If you have any other ideas, I'd love to hear them. Dressed in black suits, the swarthy, hulking men nodded to Brayden, advancing into the room, pausing just over the threshold. Please escort Xavier to our alternative waiting area. I changed my mind. I need Xavier with me. She clutched at his arm as fear snaked through her stomach. The thugs moved ponderously toward them. She glimpsed shoulder holsters under their dark jackets. We won't take up much of your time. Brayden gestured at his minions and grinned. It isn't necessary for me to speak with both of you. Since Sophia interests me more than the Wolfman, I choose to make the deal with her. Whatever it is I have, you apparently need it desperately, and I want to know why. You won't touch her. Xavier's growl reverberated through the room loud enough to crack the marble mantelpiece of the fireplace. Come, Sophia, we're leaving. He gripped her hand, swung around to the door, pulling her behind him. I can't allow that. Brayden removed a gun-shaped object from an inner pocket of his suit and aimed it at Xavier. Thanks for dropping by. He pulled the trigger and two wire darts smacked the werewolf in the chest. Xavier fell to the carpet, his face crossed with lines of pain and surprise as his body twitched. You tasered him? Sophia took a step forward, but the two thugs each grabbed one of Xavier's arms and hauled him from the room. She lifted her gaze to the attorney. Bastard. As freaked out as she was about Xavier's removal, it was nothing compared to the way her internal alarm system went off when Brayden closed the office. Chapter 15. She was alone with the dragon. Now that we've removed the unpleasantness, why don't we get to the crux of the matter? Tell me why you're here. As he advanced toward her, Sophia choked back fear. On second thought, I'll just go collect Xavier and we'll find someone else to help us. The room suddenly seemed too small to contain Brayden's presence. You came here expecting something. It's not my style to disappoint a woman. He cornered her between the low coffee table with a golden urn resting in the middle and the chaise lounge. What do you want? It's not important. Her heart hammered as his silky voice glided over her. I'm sorry to have bothered you. In her attempt to slink past him, her boot heel caught in the fringe of a throw rug. She tumbled backward onto the slick leather lounge. How convenient, Brayden murmured. He dropped beside her with his body half covering hers. Scooting into a semi-sitting position, her breath caught when she met the brilliant green of his eyes. What are you doing? She smelled his sharp, musky cologne and wrinkled her nose to stave off a sneeze. Let me up. I'm giving you what you've practically begged me for since you walked into my office. He kissed her lips. You have very expressive features. Don't think so. She pushed against his chest, but he swatted her hands away, as if they were insignificant insects. I can't get involved with you. The last came out on a squeak. Brayden ignored her protests and fumbled with the buttons on her shirt. Xavier's admonitions burst into her consciousness, and she could imagine his fierce scowl at her situation. You misunderstood me. As quickly as she rebut-toned the garment, his nimble fingers followed, undoing the progress. Then have I misunderstood your reaction to this? When his teeth closed on a taut lacy, bra-covered nipple, Sophia gasped and jerked against him. Fear slithered around her like a serpent, cold and just as deadly. She shivered, wishing he would leave her alone. That isn't what I want. She struggled, but the more she moved, the more she became wedged between the back of the lounge and the solid wall of Brayden's chest. As you wish. He sat up mere inches, allowing her a tiny bit of space. Let's exchange information. Fine. She shivered, from his breath on her skin or the way his smug voice clung to her consciousness. She couldn't say. She wished she'd studied dragons prior to the visit. Sophia buttoned her shirt, glad for the denim jacket on top of the shirt, but equally annoyed she'd worn a skirt. Provided way too much a temptation for him. What do you want? In the back of her mind she thought about Xavier. Was he hurt? Brayden's grin bordered on lecherous. Besides burying myself in your tasty bit of flesh. He lifted a dark, glossy eyebrow. Tell me how you know the portal master. You don't exhibit the natural fear he invokes, and you refer to him by his first name. She expelled breath she hadn't realized she held. If you must know, I work for Sterling. I'm a gatekeeper. She interpreted the expression on his face as shock and squirmed out from under the attorney. He enclosed her wrist in a grip of iron as he stood. Why would a gatekeeper come here? And why, if the portal master sent you, would you not get to the point of your visit long before now? Sweat dampened the back of her shirt. I never said Sterling sent me. In fact, I'm not here in an immortal court capacity. She hoped he wouldn't call Sterling to verify facts. Interesting. Brayden moved across the plush carpeting to his desk. Sophia had no choice but to follow as the pressure on her wrist never wavered. Why would you say that? How often does a gatekeeper do freelance work? I'm told the caseload in the courts is stifling enough. He shuffled through a sheaf of papers, cursing, when a pile slid off the desk to the floor. I wonder if Sterling knows you're here. He frowned and released her wrist. Pick those up for me, please. Why does Sterling have to be involved at all? Glad to be free of his grip, Sophia knelt to gather the fallen paperwork. As she stacked them, Mona's name jumped off one of the pages. She surreptitiously scanned the legal jargon. Apparently, Brayden was the attorney who represented an opposing party's lawsuit against Mona's family. She bit her bottom lip to stifle a gasp. She needed more information in order to help her friend. If seducing the dragon was what it would take, then she would have to try. Sophia swallowed hard as her mouth watered in preparation for retching. Prickles of revulsion crept over her skin at the thought, but Mona needed her help. A knot grew in her stomach at the thought of betraying her promise to the werewolf. She hoped he'd understand her motives. The niggling fact that he probably wouldn't pinged about her brain. She thrust it away. The plan would have to work. Mona was her responsibility. Brayden waggled his fingers. The paperwork? Right. She dropped the papers on his desk, then sidled closer to the dragon. Her throat suddenly dry as if common sense had fled with the saliva. Do we have to talk about the portal master right now? Surely there are other things you want from me besides information about Sterling. What's behind your change of mind? His hot gaze pinned her to the floor. For one terrible, heart-stopping moment, Sophia thought her plan wouldn't succeed. She teetered on the edge of panic, knowing she'd have to push her acting over the top to obtain the information. I wouldn't say that. After all, what kind of woman would I be if I didn't notice such a handsome man? Swallowing against her rising fear, she walked her fingertips up his chest, felt his increased heartbeat. Virility looks good on you. I can't imagine you in any other form besides a human. Bile soured her throat, but she ignored. The stakes were too high. Brayden hesitated for a few seconds, then smug grin crossed his lips. I knew You come around to my way of thinking. Every woman does eventually. Another glance at his desk sealed her resolve and justified the action even, though every cell in her body protested. Did I have a choice? Her attempt to purr like a feline manifested itself as a squeaky whisper. She ran her hands over his muscled arms and shoulders. He can snap my neck in 2 seconds. Oh, God. Cold fear caused her hands to shake. Show me the strong-willed determination that makes you win every case. Tears gathered in her eyes as Xavier's image faded. It happened so quickly she didn't see him move. One moment Sophia stood at his desk, the next Brayden pinned her against the wall as his rock-hard chest pressed into her. She placed her palms on his shoulders, intended to hold him at arm's length, but he was too strong and easily captured her wrists in one hand. Remember your dual-purpose mission. Do you oftentimes work on high-profile cases? A flood of icy terror seeped through her body as Brayden let her wrists go in favor of kneading her breasts, molding them to his hands. Tears rolled down her cheeks as her struggles were quickly subdued. Occasionally, why don't we do something more constructive with those soft lips of yours instead of discuss my cases? His mouth crashed down on hers, with enough force to draw blood. Brayden's intense green gaze bore into her, while he sucked at her lip. A dry heave threatened. Sophia fought it down by sticking Mona's face into her mind's eye. She had to save her friend. Have you ever represented celebrities? She needed to keep him talking, find out what was going on with Mona. Give me one tiny little secret. I won't tell. She batted her eyelashes and ran her hands under his shirt, self-loathing her only companion beside the ever-present fear. Although Brayden's six-pack abs were magnificent, she couldn't help but think about Xavier's chest with its covering of golden hair. The gentle touch of his hands on her skin, the twinkle in his honey-hued eyes. A twinge of guilt pinged through her stomach. She should find the werewolf and leave. Since you asked so nicely, I do some work with the rich and famous. For example, I'm suing the first family of Maasai for slander and misappropriation of government funds. He gripped her hips and pressed his arousal into her stomach. Does that satisfy your curiosity? Her cheeks burned at the dual implication. Her fingers stilled on his heated, hair-sprinkled skin. So are they guilty? Brayden shrugged. Aren't they all? He shoved his hands under her skirt to squeeze her rear end. Even if they're innocent, the government of Maasai is in turmoil. There will be upheaval, possibly civil war. He bit the skin of her neck, then pinched her nipples, laughing when she gasped. You're a pleasing handful. I can't do this. Her words were small in the looming face of the dragon. Let me go. She slumped against the wall, wishing she'd listened to Xavier. We're too far gone for regrets now. He gripped her hips and pulled Sophia flesh against his body. There's one thing you need to understand about dragons. Please leave me alone. Suddenly, her attempt at seduction went horribly, inescapably wrong. She stared, unable to stem the flow of tears when he shoved a knee between her thighs. She tried to wriggle free of his hold, but he jammed his knee tighter against her. She grasped his shoulders, digging her fingers into the muscle there, hoping she could cause him enough pain that he'd release her. Paralysis held her captive to do anything else. Mating with a dragon will be the most erotic act you've ever done. Nothing will compare to it. You'll experience so many orgasms you'll beg me to end your misery. He licked a path down her throat and ripped her shirt open to continue the assault on her breasts. Your boyfriend will be jealous he can't come close to pleasuring you as I'm about to do. Her face wet with tears, she sent out a silent plead for Xavier's help. Actually, he's my mate. I doubt you'll ever come close to understanding the complexity of that sort of relationship. Good thing I don't plan to get involved in such a thing. Brayden's hot breath seared her skin. When he pressed his knee more fully against her, Sophia whimpered. How long would it be before she shifted into stone? Wasn't this enough stress to bring on the change? I wouldn't want to be you when he finds out what you're doing. She didn't want to be her either, because Xavier wouldn't care who was at fault. He'd take them both to task. The semantics of your relationship don't matter. I'll banish all thoughts of your pretty boy. He chuckled as Sophia slumped against the wall. Once you've had sex with a dragon, you'll always crave dragon flesh. I'd be happy to take you as a lover, despite of your lack of beauty. What? She pushed at his chest. beat on the solid surface with her fists. He stumbled backward. She darted away. What do you mean? She awkwardly fastened the 2 remaining buttons on her shirt and wrapped her jacket tight around her chest. You're not blatantly attractive, but your curves more than make up for that fact. Braden chased her around the desk. We will finish what we started. I've changed my mind. Sophia had almost reached the door when Braden grabbed a handful of her hair and her head snapped back. Pain screamed along her scalp, brought fresh tears to her eyes. Xavier, where are you? I need help. Let me go. Certainly, after our business is concluded. Braden loosened his hold and reeled her into his arms. Xavier threw back his head and howled. No matter that he occupied the middle of a hallway decorated in staid shades of cream and blue in a peaceful office building, he howled loud enough to rattle the glass panels in the doors. He felt Sophia's overwhelming terror as if it were his own, driving him to find her. Slipping away from the men who held him, he loped down several hallways, then vaulted into the elevator. He jabbed at a button, waited impatiently as time seemed to drag slowly by as the car ascended. A light covering of blonde-white fur covered the backs of his hands. His canine teeth lengthened and his mouth watered in anticipation of a fight. He maintained control over the full shift into the wolf. He'd saved that for tearing out the throat of the attorney. For now he needed to assess the situation. As he stepped from the elevator when the doors opened, he heard Sophia scream. Braden is a dead man. A haze of red rage clouded his judgment and filmed his vision. Xavier crashed through the door, sending splintered chunks of the door into the air before him. Sophia, get away from him. Now. His nose itched, but he managed to stave off the shift. Not yet. Braden's hands fell away from her when Xavier snarled. Xavier. Her eyes wide and shimmering with tears, she ran across the office. She threw herself into his arms, apparently oblivious to his precarious grip on sanity. Let's get out of here. He took one look at her torn and rumpled clothing, then thrust her behind him. The 2 thugs he'd managed to waylay scrambled over the remains of the door, pistols drawn. He ignored them. His fight was with the attorney. Just as soon as I do this. With a snarl worthy of a much bigger animal, Xavier sprang across the carpet and crashed into Braden. I'll kill you for touching her. He kicked out at the man only to have the attorney duck away. The pleasures were mutually given later. The smug smile irritated Xavier. Further. Bastard. I'll kill you for that comment. Xavier's fist connected soundly with the dragon's jaw. Braden stumbled to his knees. Get up. This is only the beginning. He curled his fingers into tight fists, then jumped back as Braden lunged. Just so you know, her protests were very weak. She knows a real man when she sees him. Braden's right hook caught Xavier on his chin while his left connected solidly in the werewolf's abdomen. Pain exploded behind his eyes as Braden's next punch caught him on the side of his head. Once I kill you, I'll make it a point to have someone retrieve your soul so I can kill you a second time, just for my own amusement. He jumped on the attorney, grunting when the man went down like a brick wall. Xavier grinned as Braden struggled to take a deep breath. The wind knocked from him. Xavier pressed heavily on the dragon's chest. This is for Sophia. At close range, the punch found its mark solidly into Braden's jaw. Get off. Braden spit out a mouthful of blood before throwing Xavier over his head. He landed in a heap. Springing to his feet, he headbutted the other man. They went crashing into a bookshelf. Heavy reference volumes fell to the floor around the 2 combatants. From one side, Sophia let loose words of encouragement. Get him again. Xavier. Clean his clock. In that brief moment of distraction, Braden planted a heavy kick into Xavier's gut. The werewolf doubled over in pain, resigned when the giant minions restrained his arms. He threw an agonized glance at the single cause of his distress. Run. What about you? She inched toward the splinted door, her gaze trained on him. Damn it, woman, just go. Pain shot through his body as one of his captors kicked him in the ribs. He heard one crack. A glance at Braden showed the dragon mopping his mouth with a handkerchief spotted with dark red blood. If in slow motion, Xavier strained against his restraints. Braden withdrew a revolver from an inner pocket of his suit and pointed it at Sophia's heart. Hatred in his eyes. Take them both down to the basement until I can decide what to do